Friends, family, we are going to begin the memorial service for Dr. Allan D. Nelson. If you have a cell phone, I'd ask you kindly to place it in the silent mode at this time or turn it completely off. Services will be conducted by Rabbi Andrea London of Beth Emet, the Free Synagogue in Evanston. And we're going to start with the ancient tradition of cutting of the kriya. So anyone who has the ribbon, please rise.
Clothing represents the tearing of the heart. Really, you don't need an external marker to know how you are feeling. You wear these mourner's ribbons along with the mourning for you the appropriate comfort. Especially in this difficult time when we don't have the usual mourning customs. It's challenging as I typically make the shiva. But it's custom to wear the ribbons on your clothing for at least a period of time. So I invite you to recite this prayer after each, and then we're going to take the bottom ribbon with our hands for the symbolic prayer. Baruch atah Adonai, Elokeinu melech haolam, Dayan, Amen. Bless you, eternal our God. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, ki mimini balamot, lechen smach libi v'egel kivodi, apisor yishkon levetach. I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice, my being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful one see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. Death has taken our beloved Allan. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, be with them. For Allan's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever-new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Adonai roi lo achsar, binotesh yarbiteni, al meimun echot yinahaleni, nafshi yashavev yancheni v'maglei tzedek lema'an shemo. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Leda hi reshit uftirat hachlit, hachayim kamasahim, halicha kitzmicha mishalav l'shalav. Birth is a beginning and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage. From childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray, to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death, to life everlasting. And now we take these precious moments together to speak of the sacred pilgrimage, the journey that was Allan Nelson's life for 84 years. A man who was exceedingly intelligent, an amazing listener, who had a big heart, who helped many people in his life. As we begin to reflect on Allan's life, I'd like to invite his daughter, Rachel, to speak.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I didn't intend to write a eulogy, but it just kind of came out on a long walk yesterday. So I wanted to share with everyone who I knew my dad to be and who he was to me. He was quite a person and had quite a life. From an early age through his most recent days, my dad loved his freedom and the freedom to go out in the world, to explore, to meet people, and make connections. These were his lifelong passions. He made friendships in childhood, through his school years, in college, and in adulthood that he maintained until the end of his life. My dad loved to share stories about his various adventures with his friends, including a summer-long trip to Europe in his early adulthood, how he introduced the Frisbee to Paris. They had never seen it before. That was his contribution in the 1950s. How he went to Cuba just as Castro was seizing power. His summer working in Alaska in the gold fields, where he found and smuggled home a mastodon tusk. My dad was always curious, energetic, and up for anything that piqued his interest. My dad was also incredibly intelligent, as anyone who knew him can attest to, and he was very driven. If he was going to do something, he wasn't going to do it halfway. He excelled at school, graduated high school early, just after his 17th birthday, went straight into his studies in college. He went on to get a medical degree from Stanford, and then pursued his real passion when he studied at the Psychoanalytic Institute of Chicago. My dad devoted 54 years of his life to his psychoanalytic practice. In fact, he just shuttered his office this last April. Even then, he had second thoughts about retirement. My dad had a great capacity for empathy and was the best listener I have ever met. He devoted his professional life to helping people try to work through their emotional scars, baggage, and hurts. He was devoted to his patients, counseling some for many years to try to help them unpack their old hurts and enjoy their lives. One thing I so admired about my dad, one of many things, he believed in listening to people, giving them the time and attention to talk through their experiences and pain without trying to shove medications down their throats. He knew that medications could and often are very helpful tools, but the real issues needed to be thoughtfully and carefully worked through over time so people could actually heal and be able to live their best lives. And my dad didn't leave this at the office. Anyone who needed him, day or night, friend, relative, friend of a friend, or associate, if someone came to him in need, called him in despair, he would take hours or days to counsel them, listen, try to help them as best he could. So many people relied on my dad over the years for a myriad of what was, for a myriad of woes, and he never turned anyone away. He was always there to listen and help. And this, of course, extended to me and my brother. Throughout my life, when people would find out my father was a psychoanalyst, they would roll their eyes and say, "Oh, what was that like, being analyzed all the time?" But my dad didn't do it, at least not out loud and not to my face. I'm sure he kept his opinions to himself for the most part. From my teen angst to my early adult issues to my adult traumas, my dad was there for me. He listened without judgment and let me cry, rage, yell, or whine. He always showed me patience and tenderness, and when I needed him, he was there. He always let me know that whatever it was that I needed to express, whatever I was feeling, was real and valid. And this is one of his greatest gifts to me. My dad and I were extremely close for many years. Another one of his gifts to me, his love of adventure, travel, and the beauty, or appreciation of the beauty of the American Southwest and its native peoples. For years, my dad cultivated an interest in and then a great collection of Native American art. And whatever he was into, he wanted to share with me and my brother. So through my teens, when I was more reluctant, and into my 20s, my dad took me to Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, the Four Corners region, and we would explore. As his interest grew in Native American art, our trips transitioned from what I used to call the forced marches, these endless hikes we would go on, to the most beautiful scenery. It transitioned to visiting and meeting different Native American artists, learning about their cultures and learning about their artwork. My dad was never interested in just accumulating interesting pieces. His great passion was meeting the people who created the art, getting to know them and their families, visiting their homes, and understanding their lives. He became close friends with many artists, and these friendships lasted many, many years. Every piece of artwork that my dad brought home was not a thing, inert, but a living, breathing story. Every piece in his home was a friend. The last thing, and I believe the most important, that I want to share with all of you is my dad as a grandfather. My dad, as many of you know, was never a big family man. It wasn't his style, because he was always on the go, although he was always there for my brother and I and loved and adored us. He lived his life fully. So when I became pregnant with my first child, I honestly did not have any expectations of my dad in the grandfather role. In fact, when I was about 7 months along, I patted my belly and I said, "Dad, are you excited?" And he said, "Well, I'm really more excited for you." And that was fine, because that was my dad. I knew this. But then something happened that changed his entire worldview. It reset the focus of his life and his heart. My daughter Emily was born. And when he held her for the first time, when she was only minutes old in the hospital, I saw a total and complete love and devotion on his face. And from that moment on, the sun ceased to be in the universe, and Emily, followed by 4 more grandchildren, took its place. My dad adored his granddaughters. He wouldn't let more than a few days go by without seeing one or all of them, or at least calling to inquire about their well-being and always their happiness. In fact, Emily's first nursemaid was my father. I don't think he had ever changed a single diaper of either mine or Mike's when we were babies. But boy, he got his hands dirty with Emily. For her, nothing was too much for him. And this continued for the next almost 13 years until his passing a few short days ago. My father was so in love with each of his granddaughters in turn, each one a gift, and each one totally in need of the utmost spoiling. If they didn't express a need or wish or want for something, he would do his best to anticipate it and bring them whatever toy, treat, gadget, whatever it was that he deemed necessary for their happiness and enjoyment. Because as he told us many times, that's what life should be about, their happiness, enjoyment, and pleasure. My father was a firm believer in ice cream before dinner, presents before and after birthdays, dessert after breakfast, and frequent trips to American Girl or whatever was their interest of the moment. He told me, and I know it was absolutely true, that his greatest pleasure in life was his granddaughters, or as he's told many people, and as many people have told me in recent days, my 5 granddaughters. It was the greatest pride and joy of his life. And his greatest pleasure was his ability to spoil them. Their happiness was his greatest concern, and just like everything else he did in life, he didn't half-ass it. My dad's legacy, love, zest for life, appreciation of the beauty of the natural world, compassion for humanity, acceptance of our own vulnerability, and a delight in our precious children, and a sweet tooth the size of the American West. I love you, Dad, and I will always miss you.
I'd like to invite Leonard to speak about his brother.
Thank you, Rabbi London. I just don't think I can speak with this thing on, so I just have to take it off. Rachel gave her perspective, and mine is different. Let me just say first, this is a beautiful room we're in. It's a fine facility. I hope not to have to see the inside of it for many, many more years. I don't want to see this institution except to pass it on the street. But let me talk about Allan. He was just the best older brother that anyone could have. It was wonderful when Allan was there. Yes, Rachel's right. He had many adventures. Sometimes he wasn't at home. But boy, when he was there, life was different. There was certain, it was just a panache. It was just more exciting when he was there. He was such a role model. When I was young, maybe I couldn't tell the difference because he was more than 12 years older than me. I almost thought he was my father because he seemed like an adult to me. And he seemed so smart and so self-assured and so capable that he filled that role for me as much as my own father did. And boy, was it great growing up with him. He took me on these adventures, and maybe he'd drag Rachel along, and maybe he'd drag Michael along. He didn't have to drag me along to anything. When he was a resident in Colorado, I'd visit him with my brother Bob. We had a wonderful time. We'd go hiking. We'd go exploring the West. We'd go exploring the Southwest. Sometimes I'd visit him. We'd go skiing. He taught me how to ski. He, in one of his phrases, we went through male bonding together. And it was just a great experience. I'd play tennis with him. He'd almost always beat me, and I'd look forward to, because he was more coordinated than me. He was a better athlete than me. But I said, well, he's getting older. I looked forward to the time when I'd start beating him. But it didn't work out that way. He retired from tennis at a certain point, and we didn't do that. But we did many adventures together. We'd hike together. We'd bicycle together, and I loved every minute of it. And something I've mentioned to some of you, but when I was, at that age, I was nervous around girls, nervous around women. A lot of people are, a lot of men are, maybe a lot of women are. And I was more so than most and had my trepidations. And I met Tina and went out with her a few times and introduced my brother to her and her to my brother. And I had said something to her, to Allan, like, well, gee, I hope she likes me. I hope we can hit it off. And Allan said, you don't have to worry. She's found the one she wants. And I got to tell you, it may sound silly, but it made a huge difference. It gave me guidance as to what to do. I mean, it took sort of a load off my shoulders. He got me a job that I had for over 20 years, 21 years, because a friend of his, and he got me another job. I mean, he was just that kind of guy. He was a big brother. He helped out. I mean, psychologically, in every sense, he was just fun to be with. I'll tell you another story. Involves my son Grant, and it was the 1985. That was the year that the Bears were this dominant football team. I mean, I didn't care about the Bears before that, and haven't cared about them much since. But that year, I mean, everybody in Chicago was just enraptured with the Chicago Bears. And he would come over to my house most of the time, maybe all the time when the Bears were playing. And he'd sit down with my family and we'd cheer on the Bears and we'd share a bowl of popcorn. And my son Grant was approximately 3 years old at that time. And he learned that the Bears were going to be in something called the Super Bowl. And he said to me, Dad, let's have Uncle Al over for the Super Bowl. And we'll have popcorn and we'll have olives together watching the Super Bowl. And that's exactly what we did. And it was great. There were just so many wonderful, memorable experiences with Allan. And to use one of his phrases, he was just the top of the line. So I'll miss you, Al. I'll miss you. But thank you so much for what you have given to me. And to everybody in my family, thank you very much.
Now I'd like to invite Mike to speak.
Well, I don't know what to say. I was really not looking forward to this moment, of course. There's not much I can really add to what my uncle and my sister said. They covered almost everything. I do have a few thoughts of my own. My father, he was, like certain members of my family, a connection to another time that I didn't live in. I knew a lot about the history of Chicago and what it was like in the 50s and 60s and 40s, intimately, through his experiences and the friends of his that he met and told me about, and many of whom I met. And, one of the things he also showed me was the continuity of these things. I mean, he maintained these friendships amazingly long, longer than some people have been alive, most people in this room. I got to know some of them pretty well, many of his friends, and fortunately I was the one who had to inform many of them of this. And I know that he had quite an impact in their lives, and they did in his, and many other ways. And he was a very accomplished person, as has been said. You know, he was a doctor. He went to medical school at one of the finest institutions in the world. He served his country in the military, in the Navy, very proudly and honorably, and he spoke well of that. And his fellow officers as well spoke well of him and maintained some of those connections and friendships as well. And just the way he maintained friendships from his school days through his professional days, through even when he was in the short stint in the military, it just showed me, you know, what impact he had. And of course, the impact on how he had on my life. So many things about myself when I see that are a result of him, and just my worldview and certain things, even when I don't think about it. He inspired me and taught me and affected me, and you know, my appreciation for the world and nature through my mother and father and through my trips with him and all of the places he took me, and took me onto Native American reservations and places a lot of people never go. Not touristy areas. Taught me how to see the world not as a tourist, but as a citizen of the world, and appreciate other parts of it. So that when I went with him to southern Mexico or the Southwest or the hinterland and parts of British Columbia or Ontario, Canada, around areas, that was more memorable to me than any beaches or tourist attractions, because that wasn't his thing. And so it never became my thing. Also, like I said, you know, the appreciation for the past. He would tell me, you know, stories about his family going back and how things were in the 20s, and, you know, from his mother. And, you know, I had vivid images in my head of how things were 120, 130 years ago for her and him. And I still try to carry that, the way things were, and just going to his old neighborhoods in the city and him showing me that, and other parts of this country, and he made me appreciate this nation. It's a difficult time in this country right now, but he helped instill in me the fact that it's a great place, and it's been through a lot, and it'll persevere, as it always has. And unfortunately, it's lost one of its finest citizens, and that was my father, who served his country and admired it and affected many people in many ways throughout this country. Maybe nobody famous, maybe nobody influential, but in their own ways. And I don't know. Just remember him as the person that he was, and that he was always there. And many times as an adult, when, you know, I could be on my own doing my thing, he was there for me. At least there to talk to me, even when I was far away. And the moment I first became a father myself, he was the first person I spoke to. And I could just hear the emotion from him on the phone, and it really meant a lot to me. And when any of my kids came, he was always the first one to show so much joy and love. And that's probably what I'll miss the most about him, through everything. And just what he's done for everybody. I'll always be thankful. When everybody talks about a father or having a dad, I always think of him. And what an example he was. And he'll always be. Thank you.
We've heard so many beautiful stories testifying to Allan Nelson's character, about his love for his work and how he helped many people, and how those gifts of what he learned as a psychoanalyst benefited friends who were lifelong friends and family. Allan was born and raised in the South Shore in Chicago, the eldest of 4 children. As we've heard, after graduating from South Shore High School, he went on to the U of I and then to Stanford Medical School, where he graduated at 24 years old, and then served, as we've heard, in the U.S. Navy. And we have some of the evidence here of one of his passions, as he was an avid collector of Native American art. And I understand from Rachel and Mike that his 2-bedroom apartment, floor to ceiling and all surfaces, including closets, are filled with baskets and pots and artwork. But what was most important is not just a piece of artwork, but the story and the person that went behind it. What an amazing lesson to teach your children, to respect other cultures, to be curious about other people, and to enjoy the landscape of this country, which he adored. At age 19, Allan traveled to Europe, but later in life, it was really this country, in Canada and Mexico, it was North America, that he liked most. Allan was charming and had a sense of adventure and a magnetic personality, and he liked a good meal. Apparently, in addition to his sweet tooth, he had a taste for junk food, including Big Al's Italian beef. And he was a voracious reader of history, but he also loved a good sappy tearjerker, sometimes to the surprise of his children. Allan was a great brother, father, and son. When he was growing up, he used to stand up to his mother, which Leonard said his siblings really appreciated. Later in life, he was very close with his mom. They would play golf together, and they traveled together, and he visited her regularly. And as Leonard said, so many good times in his life are associated being with Leonard, who was a role model and who was, for many years, a father figure. Allan enjoyed being a father to Mike and Rachel, and I love the story that Rachel says he wasn't sure about how he was going to feel about being a grandfather, and in fact didn't think it was going to be for him as well. But as soon as Emily was born, he became Papa. And he spoiled Emily, Hannah, Kimberly, Catherine, and Kiara, giving them toys and treats. I love the stories about cartoons and blue juice, popsicles, the park, and the beach with Papa, that being with you gave him so much joy and so much pleasure. And he loved holidays when the family would gather for Thanksgiving, Passover, Seders, and birthdays, even as it became more difficult for him to play. Just to be in the presence of family and to see everyone filled his heart with such great joy. And he leaves behind a legacy of children and grandchildren who are thoughtful and smart and kind, a passion for Native American art and appreciation for other cultures, a sense of adventure and appreciation for the beauty of this country. And he also taught and he lived the capacity to listen and empathize, a quality that is sorely missing in much of our country today, frankly. To be able to sit with people's pain, to say expressing our feelings is the right thing to do, and to love and to support and to allow people to grow in the way that they needed to grow and to find the insights they needed to find without imposing opinions, thoughts on anyone else. And as we gather to say goodbye, we express our appreciation for all of those gifts. Mike and Clara, Rachel and Mark, Emily, Hannah, Kimberly, Catherine, and Kiara, Bob, who could not be here today, Leonard, Tina, and all of the extended family. I express my condolences to you. I know how close all of you were. I know what an impact Allan had on your lives. Zichrono livracha, may his memory always be for a blessing. As you continue to share the stories of how he lived his life, and as you live by the example that he set. In this way, O God, His memory will continue to bless and strengthen us. Alav HaShalom, O God, we pray that Allan will now rest in peace. Amen. Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Bavarach. God gave us the life of Allan Nelson. God has now taken him away. Praise be the name of God. We now take a moment to offer in our own hearts a silent prayer for Allan and for his beloved family. God, you give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on the lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort and the sorrow-laden for consolation. Oh God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade, that we have a timeless pattern in a world that is a dwelling place of your love and of your glory. I now invite everyone to rise as together we recite the memorial prayer, El Morei Rachamim. El Morei Rachamim Shorchen Ba'amromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechonatach At Kanfei Shechina, Im Kedoshim Torim Kazar Akia Masirim, Et Nishmat Allan ben Myron Besadel, Shalach La'olamo, Baal HaRachamim Yasirehu Beseter Kanafav La'olamim, Yitzchor B'Torah HaChaim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo, V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Allan Nelson, son of Myron and Seidel, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. And now we continue together in the words of the Mourner's Kaddish, praising God's name for all the gifts that Allan gave to us, and praying now for peace for Allan and for all of us who are in mourning. Together, Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach rute, V'yamlich malchute, B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mavarach, Le'alam Olalmei Almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei Kedusha B'ruyacho. Leila min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehi Shlomo Rabbah min Shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. O God, who makes peace in places far beyond our knowing or understanding, send peace to all of you who are in mourning and comfort. As together we say, Amen. You can sit down.
This does conclude the memorial service for Dr. Nelson, and I'd like to thank everyone who attended live stream on behalf of the family. This does conclude the service. Thank you.